Welcome back, everyone. Glad you could stop by. I'm Zell, and today we've got a Cabela's exclusive Benchmade Griptilian 551 to look at. It's a little different than your standard Benchmade Griptilian, so why don't y'all come in here, we'll get a close look and see what the differences are. Taking a closer look at the Benchmade Griptilian 551 Cabela's exclusive, we've got sand-colored handles, all blacked out hardware, and a BK1 coated blade. One thing to note here is the pattern across the knife is different. The standard 551 Griptilian, and the mini grip for that matter, use a kind of a diamond shaped pattern here, and on the Cabela's exclusive we have little ovals. Seems to work just as well, and it's something a little different. From this side of the knife we can see we've got torque screw hardware, have our axis lock, we'll talk about that more, and a thumb stud. Also have our drilled and tapped holes for the pocket clip, which we'll get to in a minute. As we roll around to the back side, we've got some jimping molded in here and some jimping molded in here, as well as some jimping there on the liner. And the molded jimping in the glass-filled nylon actually works pretty darn good. Rolling around to the other side, we have our standard Benchmade clip, which I'm probably going to call Benchmade and see if I can't get one of the split arrow clips or one of the waterfall style that they have on the new 551-1. And here are our body screws, all Torx hardware again, and we do have a lanyard hole. It's not a real big lanyard hole, but it does have one. And as we roll around to the top, we can see we have a fairly well centered blade, and we have more jimping across here and across here and up the spine of the knife, and even some more right down in here on the liner. And as I said, we'll get to some more of that and how it works here in just a minute. For our closed numbers, we have 4.65 for length, a thickness of 0.64, and a height of 1.41 at its widest point. And all these numbers are off my instruments, but Benchmade does a really good job of giving you true numbers. The only number that was off was the weight, and we'll get to that, and there may be a reason for that. With the knife open, we have a total length of just over 8 inches, and a blade length of 3.45, and an edge length of 3.35, with a blade thickness of 0.115. Well guys, this BK1 coating absorbs a lot of light. Hopefully we can see these grinds. Our grind here is flat, and we've got a swedge up here, and overall the knife comes down nice and thinly to the point without being overly thin to the point of making it fragile. And as you can see, we have the stock edge on this blade right now, and there's a reason for that. We'll get to that here in a minute. But this is D2 tool steel. It is not the 154 cm that is in the standard Griptilian. It's hardened to 60 or 62 on the Rockwell scale, which should give you better edge holding ability over the 154 cm. However, I don't believe it's quite as stain resistant, but it has the BK1 coating on it, so everything ought to be just fine. Alright guys, here's some of the magic of the Griptilian. It doesn't take much of a flick, and it doesn't take much of your wrist to get that blade open. And whenever you pull those back, just a little nudge and that blade falls back home. It's probably one of the slickest non-ball bearing knives I've had my hands on. And whenever you put your hand around this knife, all that jimping we talked about, jimping right here, a little bit more back here, got some up the thumb ramp on the blade, and right here near the blade, and then a little bit more back here across the butt of the knife. That may be why they call it a Griptilian. But whenever you get it in your hands, none of that jimping is so aggressive that it's going to make spots on your fingers or cut into your hand. But it is all very useful. It all holds that knife in there. Doesn't really matter how you get a hold of the knife. That jimping is just well placed. Benchmade did some thinking whenever they designed this thing. Or I guess I should say, Mr. Mel Pardue did some thinking whenever he designed this thing. The last number that we haven't talked about yet is weight. Whenever I put this thing on my scales, I got 4.05 ounces. Benchmade puts the Griptilian at 3.88 ounces. My guess is the D2 blade is a tad bit heavier, 3.88 to 4.05. That's not enough to worry about. Heck, that could just be the oil I put down in the pivot. But it was the only difference between my measurements and Benchmade's measurements. Alright guys, so as we saw in the video, the major differences between the Cabela's exclusive knife and the regular Griptilian is the blacked out hardware all around and the D2 blade with the BK1 coating. And with the D2 you probably do want that BK1 coating. It's not as stain resistant as the 154 CM or SV30. And we also, of course, have the different texture here on the handle. Cabela sells this knife for $119 and some change, which is right around the going price for a standard Griptilian. So I think you're getting a good deal, getting it through Cabela's whenever you compare it to the standard Griptilian. One thing we talked about in the close-up video was I haven't sharpened this thing yet. And as you guys know, normally by the time you guys see a knife, I've sharpened it at least once so that I can, at the very least, tell you how it is to sharpen. Things like S110V and the Mannix, you guys need to know that that stuff is some hard sharpening steel. You don't want to go after that with whetstones. I know that D2 is not as hard to sharpen as S110V. I have another knife that has D2 in it, and it's not a terrible knife to sharpen. And knowing that, I wanted to send this knife out to the Apostle P. I'll link his channel in the description to have a full spa service on this one, because I plan to carry this knife a lot, and I'm a pretty good knife sharpener. I'd say a little above amateur, but this guy's an expert. So whenever the knife comes back, we'll get another video on it. I'll show you what he did. I'll give you my thoughts on it. We've talked about price a little bit, and Benchmade gets beat up on the Griptilian family prices. The mini grip at going for around 80 to 90 bucks, and the full-size Griptilian going for 100, 120 and up. I'm not too upset about that. I think you're getting one heck of a good knife. You could move up a little bit with a different Benchmade. You've got the 707, 940, and some others, but the price goes up substantially as you move up into those knives, and you start getting aluminum handles and other materials. And the FRN handles, they may be a sort of plastic, But if you're in semi-rough or really rough work, I believe the FRN would serve you better than the aluminum. I know I don't take aluminum handled knives whenever I'm going to do things where it's going to be rough and I'm going to get the handle beat up. So, yeah, I think Benchmade could do us better. They could move us up to an S30V blade in this, or they could give us a bit of a price break. But I also think that for what you're getting here, it's a pretty fair price. I mean, how many knives have an action that works like this? And it's not many out there. And that's one of those things. If you've never had a Benchmade, you need to get one in your hands. These things just work. Flip out nice and easy. Just a very easy flick of the wrist there. And with the right amount of gravity or a little flick of the wrist and pull, they close themselves. I mean, it's really almost telepathic. So, even though we've got the plastic handles, even though we don't have full liners, we've got a fairly light knife for its size. And I don't think you're going wrong getting one. If you're one of the naysayers out there, you're one of the people that's worried about the FRN handles, go get one in your hand before you make a decision like I did, because I stayed away from these things for a long time because of that FRN. I didn't think that was a good idea for me, and I was wrong. Anyhow, guys, we'll get another look at this knife whenever it gets back from the Apostle P, and you guys know the drill. Whack one of those buttons down there, like, share. Let your friends see this, and let me know what you think of it. And whack that subscribe button. It's warming up outside, and as it warms up, we've got some neat things for you. And I sure don't want you to miss it. So, for now, you guys have a great day, and I'll see you next time.